This week we were looking at Romans 14, and in Romans 14, Paul is all about the meat. Now, I've never talked about why I'm a vegetarian. A lot of people know that I am, but since we're here in Romans 14, where Paul is talking about those who eat meat and those who eat only vegetables, the one whose faith is weak eats only vegetables. This is shameful stuff here. Come on, Paul, be better. And yes, I am a vegetarian, and no, I don't want to talk to you about protein, but we'll come back to this. I thought I would take a few minutes to talk about why I've made some of the choices that I've made for myself and my family, and then maybe we can get to actually what's more important about that on the other side of it. So why am I a vegetarian? Well, there's actually a number of different reasons involved there. A number of years ago, over a decade now, we began looking at our diet as a family and some of the choices that we wanted to make. And the truth was, part of it was just around health. There's a lot of evidence that most of us in North America are eating too much meat, particularly too much red meat. And I'm not great at moderation. It's just part of my personality. I'm an 8 on the Enneagram. I like to go hard into things. And so rather than cutting back on meat, I just decided to jump full in, and we went with a vegetarian diet. So part of it was health, and I actually felt really good. It does take a bit of time for your body to adjust. There's lots of things going on in your gut when you switch off of meat towards more beans and vegetables. But over time, you actually end up feeling really good, or at least I did, and it worked for me, so I stuck with it. But there were other reasons as well. The second factor was our carbon footprint. The production of meat takes an incredible amount of energy, an amount of water, an amount of carbon that it produces for us to eat the kinds of meat and the levels of meat that we do. Now, that's not to say that all meat should be cut out of everyone's diet just on an environmental basis. There's actually some real evidence that suggests that animals raised in cooperation with crops on smaller scale farms can actually lower the overall carbon footprint. It's because grasslands tend to absorb more carbon than almost any other type of plants that can be planted on an area of land. And so actually, when you grow some crops and you cycle that around and you move herds of animals through that, those grasslands end up absorbing more carbon than is produced. So I'm not saying everyone needs to cut out meat just so you can be environmentally friendly. But again, probably most of us could stand to cut down on the amount of meat, particularly red meat, we're eating. So that's one of the reasons was environmental footprint, and we make a lot of decisions to try to do that. We live close to work, I ride my bike as much as possible. We try to make choices as a family that lower our impact on the environment around us. So that's the second one. The third one is large-scale industrial farming. I really don't have a problem with the idea of humans hunting, the idea of humans eating meat, but as our large-scale agriculture has moved into the production of meat, I think what we have to recognize here is that the mistreatment of animals has become epidemic in North American culture. Animals are not treated well, they're not looked after, they are being abused for our diets, and we are able to keep that at a distance from us. Most of us never actually see an animal slaughtered, most of us never actually see an animal being butchered before we receive it, all cut up and nicely, neatly packaged for us. And I think that's a real problem. When we don't understand what goes into the meat that we eat, when we don't understand how it's produced, how it's slaughtered, how it's packaged, how it's moved towards us, I think we are distancing ourselves from a lot of that suffering. Now, you can buy meat from smaller scale local farms, particularly here in Alberta. It's actually really easy to get very ethical meat. I know a lot of people are hunters. That's not really my issue at all, but I'm not interested in doing all that. I have no interest in hunting. It's not something that I find appealing at all. And so for me, actually stepping away from meat as an industry, particularly again, that large scale agriculture, that was something that I felt good about because I didn't want to participate in animal suffering. Again, it's not the same for everyone. Everyone makes different choices around that. I think you can actually access really good ethical meat, particularly here in Alberta, but I wasn't interested in doing all that work, so I stepped out of it. Now, the last one is this, and it comes from my faith. And again, I don't think that every Christian needs to make the same decisions that I do, but I really do believe in a future that one day all of us will be able to live at peace with each other. And the prophet Isaiah talks about the day when the little lamb will lie down with the lion and the child with the cobra, that there will be a moment in the future when we do not need to victimize each other to coexist. And I think that if I have the opportunity to live in that way, where I don't have to contribute to the suffering of another human, I don't have to contribute to the suffering of any animal, then I want to live in that future right now. Now again, I have the privilege of doing that. I live in Canada. I'm relatively wealthy. I can access all kinds of healthy foods whenever I want to. I can get an avocado. I can eat almonds whenever I want. All of these things are accessible to me because of my privilege. But because I have that, I have the opportunity to live where no one else, nothing else have to die, then I choose to do that. So this is something that's really important to me. For all of these reasons, for my health, I feel good on a vegetarian diet. I get to reduce my carbon footprint for myself and my family on a vegetarian diet. I don't participate in large-scale industrial agriculture where I feel like animals are being mistreated or abused. Because of my vegetarian diet and because of my Christian faith, I get to lean into an eschatological future where I really do hope and believe that one day there will be no more suffering and death. So for all of these reasons, I make all of these choices, but here's the point I really want to get to. And it's the one that I think Paul is really trying to reinforce in Romans 14. We actually need to not enforce our choices on another. Paul actually says near the end of the chapter, whatever you think about these things, learn to keep it between yourself and God. It's not my job all the time to project my convictions and my choices onto everyone around me. Now, when I know someone, when they invite me to share my story and why I've made the choices that I have, then I get to share that in humility. I get to share my story with them, and they may be influenced by that. But my goal here in this video, my goal in life, is not to convert anyone to the way of a vegetarian diet. I'm not really interested in that. I do think we need to be more thoughtful about our choices when it comes to what we purchase and what we eat and where we source our food from. But all of us are going to do that in different ways. And when we learn how to not just tolerate each other, but respect each other, to learn from each other, to take in the stories around us, I think what will happen is we will end up with a more well-rounded imagination of our place in the world. None of us have a monopoly on God. We all see a very narrow slice of the divine through our experience. But when I am willing to listen to the people around me, when I am willing to listen and learn from hunters in my community that tell me about how important it is for them to be in touch with the land, in touch with the animals that they consume, I learn something about that. And I come closer to a more robust, a more well-rounded imagination of God. And this is what Paul really wants to get at here in this chapter when he talks about those who eat meat and those who don't. It's the idea that we need to learn from each other. And to do that, we need to listen to each other. And to do that, we need to fully accept each other. Without qualification, we need to allow stories that don't align with ours into our lives. Because a life lived exclusively in the company of like-minded people will be very limited. But when I'm willing to listen, when I'm willing to learn, when I'm willing to invite new stories and perspectives into my life and way of thinking, I will find myself a more healthy, more well-rounded, more robust, more sacred version of myself. So if you eat meat, enjoy it. Find out where it comes from. Think about how you can source it ethically, but enjoy it. Celebrate that as the goodness of the creation God has placed around you. And if you are a vegetarian, then I'm cheering you on. We can share some recipes. I am always looking for something new that I can try to cook this week. But regardless, the goal is this, that we learn to accept one another. We learn to celebrate one another. We learn to learn from each other, and in that, we learn more about this God who loves us so deeply.